Mike Mahoney. It's Mahoney. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you for your many, many, many years of service, decades of service. We appreciate it. How are you?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm fine, thank you.
I've heard from other other folk that have done service, not like myself, unfortunately, that it's kind of a little bit of a cliche to say thank you for that. What do you think about that?
I leave that to the military. For me, it was a job. I was a job I was passionate about, but it was still a job. And so I normally just say thank you for your service to military people who really, put themselves on the line and put their lives on the line. But
Sure.
it is nice, people who respect police, it's nice that they would say that. And so if someone says, yeah, yeah, you dedicated your life to law enforcement, thank you. That's nice, particularly in our environment now with the George Floyd, not many people like cops. So
Yeah, yeah. Although I think that the country's kind of been realizing what happens when you don't have cops and, it kind of,
yeah,
depending
it's
on what
tough.
kind of cities you're in, kind of fall, I mean, it's pretty clear what kind of tangible impact you have. And, like everything else in the world, I think there's a lot of room for nuance. There's a lot of room for good cop, bad cop, and every kind of sense
Yeah,
of the word.
absolutely.
So, so spent your first part of your career as a New York police officer, the
That's right.
NYPD. Uh,
Yes.
Tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, about yourself. Are you from? You sound like you're from New York,
Oh yeah,
and
I know. I know. I can't shake that accent. So
yeah, tell me a little bit about how you got into this and how you got into law as a career.
well, the my whole family was on the job. So my father, my brother, I've uncles, cousins. They're all NYPD.
Hmm.
I was a little reluctant to go in when I was in college. I
Hmm.
I w- I graduated college in 1987, and I went in the police academy of July of 1987. So I didn't spend a lot of time floating around looking for a job, but there was a stretch there where I just couldn't find anything. And
Hmm.
my father, who was a career in law enforcement, said, "Why don't you go in the NYPD? If anything, it'll look good on your resume if you want to go get another job
Yeah,
later on." And
yeah.
so I wasn't somebody who always dreamed about being a cop. My older brother dreamed about being a cop. He wanted to do it, and he went on the job, became a detective, and did the whole homicide case things. Like he had that kind of career. He was always gung ho, but I was somewhat reluctant, and that's how I was able to develop the character in my book, the land Kosovo, the land of broken toys, Kosovo. Oh my God,
That's okay. Happens to the best
so
of
it's a
us.
long day, man.
I've had interviews where I'm so excited and getting ready, and I've read this guy like 10 of this guy's books, and I go, well, and then I mispronounce his first name, and I'm like, shit, man,
Yeah.
like you have
Oh,
one go
I
at
mean, I
this
should
thing.
know the book title. I sweated over this book for many, many years. I don't even want to admit how many years it took me to write the book. But
Wow.
the character, the protagonist in there, JB Byrne, he's a little bit kind of a reluctant hero, and that was, let's say, a little bit of me. Just somebody who's like, you know, I could really give or take the job initially,
Hmm.
but I grew to love it. I ended up growing to love it. And then I loved it even more when finished and went overseas and started doing consulting for the Department of Justice and for the U.S. Department of State and working overseas with with foreign police officers and police forces was really fantastic experience for me. But getting back to New York, I can bring it a comparison for your audience about how when I came on to maybe some comparison to today. When I came on, the department was about 70% white. And out of that 70%, they were mostly Irish. There's a
Hmm.
long-standing tradition of Irish police officers. You might be too young to remember the Bugs Bunny cartoons, where,
No, I'm
my
not.
goodness, in Bugs Bunny, they have a scene where the police arrive and he's got an Irish accent and he says, "Okay, Clancy, take the boys and surround the house." And he's doing the Irish accent. And so this cartoon, I don't even know, maybe Bugs Bunny's from the 50s or the 60s. The department was all Irish and predominantly Catholic. They were Protestant Irish also, but these were the people who came off the boat who could speak English.
Hmm.
So the Irish came off the boat, they spoke English, and the police force, they were literate also. Ireland had a pretty good literacy rate.
Hmm.
They were able to just kind of transition into the police, civil service jobs. They're pretty good jobs. And so the department was very white Irish. They had that tradition. And so when I went on, they weren't from Ireland. There was very, I'd worked with one or two guys with an Irish brogue, but most of them were the grandsons and the
Hmm.
granddaughters of these Irish immigrants. A lot of them had fathers and grandfathers that were on the job. And I'm really happy that today that's not the case because the department got a lot of criticism for being too white and
Right.
being brutal and this whole white supremacist type philosophy. It's I see it more as a virus that's going on. People talking about the NYPD like this is a racist white police force, and these are young people, and I'm like, excuse me, this department is 61% minority. The NYPD is a minority majority police force. It's not white. It's not like when I came on. It's a very different force, and it really does reflect New York now. So I am somewhat of a NYPD or a police apologist. I do kind of stick up for the cops when they're wrong, though. I'm not going to defend them when they're wrong.
Sure.
You just kind of say, I. But the accusation of this, and I've heard this even at the State Department. Someone told me that the police forces in the U.S. come from the slave patrols. This is complete nonsense. That they have nothing to do with slave patrols. The big departments, or actually most departments, not even the big ones, but the earliest police departments in the United States, they came from a Sir, and I might get his first name wrong. I think it's Robert Peel. There's a famous guy who wrote a book. I think it's Norman Peel. So Sir Robert, the last name I had correct, Peel.
Okay.
So Peel in like 1820 set up the Metropolitan Police in London, and he structured it on a paramilitary basis with a rank structure. And
Hmm.
he had these objectives and goals of the police, which still are true today, to serve the community, to enforce the law. They didn't come from slave patrols. They were
Right.
copied maybe some of the first cities. People argue over who had the first police department, but Cleveland, Chicago, Boston, and New York were among the earliest police
Hmm.
forces in the U.S. And so from that tradition on, not that they didn't have pretty racist tradition in the early days. I'm not going
Well, the
that
whole
far,
world
but
was, right?
yeah, but the police force now, it's very diverse. They speak, I don't know, maybe like 140 languages. I think I don't if you're working on patrol now in New York and you have someone on the street up, they speak Urdu or something even more obscure, maybe an African dialect. We can get on the radio, and I say we. I haven't been on in a long time, but they can get on the radio and find somebody who speaks that language,
Yeah.
no problem. And it's nice in that respect. So the department has changed, and I think it's a good thing. Very happy about the changes that occurred. But I went over the early days a little bit in the book, and I just want to mention about the book. I set out to do a comedy,
A
and,
comedy.
yeah,
Okay.
well, you are you familiar with? There was a book called Mash 4077, and it became a movie, Mash 4077, and it
No, not
became a
familiar.
series. So I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Ephraim, if you
Yeah,
have
that's right.
people,
You nailed it. Yeah.
Ephraim, okay. If you have people over 40 that are listening to this, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and the people under 40 have no idea what I'm talking about. But this is a 1970s sitcom that took place in Korea with a bunch of surgical doctors, and they made it
Mhm.
into a comedy. And this is serious stuff. They got really heavily wounded people coming into this mobile surgical unit, but the doctors there were joking and pranking and trying to keep it's a little bit of gallows humor, but they were keeping the mood light. And it was
Mhm.
a very funny, interesting comedic book that turned into a movie and eventually became a TV series. So I left NYPD in 2001 to serve in the United Nations mission in Kosovo. So I went there as a police officer. The way this was different from other police missions, there were police missions in Haiti, there were police missions in East Timor, there was a police mission in Bosnia. But the main
Can you I'm
difference,
sorry, for anyone that wouldn't be familiar with what a police mission's purpose would be, or, what the goal is.
they
What are you
go to
trying to accomplish?
post-war countries. So you go to a post-war country, and in some cases they were like mentors and monitors, and
Okay.
they did provide some training, but a lot of it was mentoring and monitoring. The Bosnia mission was quite large, same with Haiti, but they were there as
So
mentors
this
and
is like helping
monitors.
reconstruct it.
Yeah, it,
Almost.
oh, it was always part of reconstruction. All the police missions, the one thing they had in common, these were post-conflict areas.
Gotcha, gotcha.
And the
That's very
difference
interesting.
between Kosovo and the other conflict areas was that the entire police force in the Kosovo region left and went up into Serbia proper. And Kosovo itself had no police force once the bombing campaign was completed. So the UN officers that went in, we were wearing gun belts and we had arrest powers. We weren't there as monitors or advisors. We were there as the police. So
Mhm.
the book takes you on a journey through some cases that occurred in the area that I was working in. And that's what I was really trying to capture. But there was a lot of funny stuff. There was so many interesting things about the mission that I thought I could do for a MASH 4077 style comedy. And to be more specific, I get there and I'm doing patrol with a Russian guy. And he's a really nice guy and he's a very intelligent guy. And we're out on patrol. And finally, after like a week or so of working with him, I asked him, where did you work in Russia? Did you do patrol or were you an investigator? He said, I was a psychiatrist. I said, you a psychiatrist? He's like, yeah, I would counsel police officers and I would also help with the screening of police officers before they go on the job.
Mhm.
So I asked him, you don't really have police experience then if you're a psychiatrist. He said, yeah. He had like a captain's rank. He's a police psychiatrist. And I'm like, I'm riding around in Kosovo doing patrol with a Russian psychiatrist. I mean, I really felt like I could get some comedy
Yeah.
out of
Yeah, you
that.
definitely
And
could.
typical also with the UN, I had this one guy from Jordan. I ended up becoming friends with him. This guy, he wasn't an Arab. He was Circassian. He was a different ethnicity. He's a Jordanian guy, real proud Circassian guy from Jordan, and he was so much fun to work with. But he didn't have a great command of the English language. So of course they put in the UN they put him on the radio, and
Mhm.
she would say like, "Oh my brother, you cannot imagine." That's the way the actually when he pressed down on the mic, he was always smoking a cigarette. So he presses down the mic. Here, that's the first thing. So we know we have a job coming. And he'd
Right.
say, "Oh my brother, you cannot imagine. You have this situation. It is very, very, very bad. You go." He gives us the location, and he would say something like, "You go there, and when you see them, you kick them." And you know, I'm thinking New York. Oh my God, how many lawsuits are we going to get with this
Yeah,
transmission?
you're not quite in New York anymore, right? You're
Yeah,
not in
yeah.
Kansas
So
either.
I try to describe some of that and use some of the gallows humor, but what happened was that my beta readers read the book, they loved the story, but they thought that the comedy maybe wasn't appropriate and in some areas might have detracted from the story itself. They loved the whole
Mhm.
story, but I have some pretty brutal murders and the murders are this is based on a true story. It's not a memoir or a biography. It is a work of fiction. I want to make that clear. But those crimes described in there did occur while I was there. And what I did was I made the crimes all done by one person. And that's the antagonist in the book. So I have an antagonist who committed all the crimes. The truth is, it was done by probably several people. And
Mhm.
there was arrests in some of them, but the protagonist in the book in real life didn't make the arrest, which, was loosely based on me. So that's kind of the setup, let's say, for the whole book. But I'm happy to talk a little bit more about NYPD or I don't know what would interest you. I mean, or your audience.
Well, I think this is all great. I actually that was great because you're giving me a ton to work with over there. So thank you for that. I want to start actually a little bit. Well, you said at the beginning. I want to kind of zoom back a little bit, and you weren't particularly. interested in the idea of joining the police force. What did I guess kind of call to you, or what was a little bit more of your passions or pursuit? Because I mean, it seems like even after the police force, your career really revolve around police work. But there's a lot of traveling, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of meeting different types of people. Did you what was really driving you, or what did you think when you were younger? What kind of direction were you hoping to head? If like in an ideal world, what kind of temperament did you have that would have made, I guess, that this kind of new life that kind of stemmed from police work? Like police work feels like the basis, but like you have your own way of doing things within that context.
I I I can't say that I was particularly thoughtful when I was young and single.
Wait, you grew up in Manhattan, or you grew up in New
No,
York?
no, I'm from Long Island originally.
Long Island, which
I
part?
lived in Manhattan for about 15 years when I was a police when I graduated from the academy. I lived in Manhattan, but I'm not a New York City guy. I'm a bridge and tunnel guy
Gotcha, gotcha,
originally. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And okay, that's good to know. And so where which part of Long Island were you growing up in? This is the early '80s, I guess.
Yeah, this is well, I grew up in the 70s. This is
'70s.
Oyster Bay. Yeah,
Oyster Bay, right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Billy Joel territory.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha, gotcha. So going to the city is a pretty significant shift in terms of the environment and pretty much everything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would only as a kid I would only visit the city here and there. Maybe go in for the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Sure.
My father's from the Bronx and my mother's from Manhattan, so I have cousins in there. And like I said, my older brother went on the job, so he
Yeah.
moved into Manhattan as soon as he became the cop, and I did the same thing. I moved into Manhattan, but yeah, I love the city, and to
Mhm.
this day I still love the city. I find it a little expensive. That's
It's
why
crazy.
why I don't
It's
stay
nuts.
there.
I lived there for all of, say, 5 months. I grew up in Rockland, about 45 minutes north.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I went to Binghamton for college, and the first thing that everyone
Nice.
does post-college is you move straight to the Upper West Side of Manhattan,
Get like
or
five
Upper East
roommates.
Side. Sorry, yeah, with 10 roommates, exactly, right? And
10
and
roommates.
just and somehow, I mean, it was me and 2 of my very close friends in a one-bedroom apartment. This is circa 2017, maybe 18,
Okay.
and we're paying, I think, 5 or 6 grand for the apartment, splitting that between us, and the apartment was on 96th and Columbus, and my apartment was my room, my cutout room, that we put up those fake walls, and,
Yeah.
we had to do what everyone has to do, was facing east, was facing Central Park, which was great with floor-to-ceiling windows, but
Oh,
in the
wow.
summertime, my room didn't get access to the AC, and I would wake up drenched from the sun, just absolutely blitzing into my apartment,
But
and
I
I'm
mean,
there.
those are good times. I had a similar situation when I first moved in the city. I had roommates, and it was a lot of laughs. We were young and single and hanging out, and I did a lot of security jobs on the side just in order to keep the New York lifestyle.
Mhm.
I mean, I couldn't really afford to go clubbing all night. We would usually have a few drinks at home and then just order
Go
one
out, yeah,
drink
of
when we
course.
go to the club. I just couldn't afford it. But the yeah, the New York Manhattan was fantastic for me. I used to ride my bike on Sunday morning, especially in the summertime, riding up First Avenue when the lights were all synchronized, get up to
Mhm.
Central Park, do a lap around Central Park, and then come down through Times Square as the lights were synchronized heading down. Yeah, those New York is such a special place for me. Even though I
Yeah.
didn't grow up there, but it's a special place.
Yeah, it still is, and everyone that goes to visit it feels that life there. How did it change over the course of the years that you were there, as far or did when, over the you were a cop there for 20 years, you said? I believe?
Well, yeah, I left, went to Kosovo, and then came back. So yeah, it was 20. Yeah.
Okay. And so tell me about, like, the change in Manhattan or New York City in New York City over time, if, or at least some of the things that you were able to notice as a police officer.
I w- I was a young police officer when New York City had 2,200 murders. I don't know if you're aware of that time period, but that was 1990. And this was one of the things that got Giuliani, who was a Republican,
Mhm.
he got elected in a city that was like 75 Democrat, maybe
Yeah.
higher. He got
Yeah.
elected because people were just scared and
Mhm.
frustrated. He said, I'll go after crime. I'll do this what I'll do what needs to happen in order to reduce crime. And so that's a lot of people. I mean, 2,200 murders in 1990. That's almost like a country at war.
Yeah.
So I think this year, I think it's only like 130 murders, maybe
What?
140
Really?
murders up until now. Yeah, I mean, so
That's I mean, that's
my
crazy.
father was a
I
homicide.
would have expected the numbers to be way higher than that.
No,
So
crime is completely down in New York right now. And I can't give any credit to Mondamni, but you know what? If crime were going up, he would take the blame. So now the crime is so low. Fine, take the credit. I thought
mhm,
Giuliani probably got too much credit because crime went down nationally around the same time.
right.
Giuliani got known worldwide.
Yeah.
The difference was that crime in New York went down like 50%. Right, like 1 year after he got in, it dropped like 50%. And each year after, it went down even more. And the country also went down about 30%. So it was more dramatic in New York. But I
Right.
think we also had a bigger problem with the crack epidemic. Back then, crack
Mhm.
had taken over the streets of New York, and it was a very dangerous time. I mean, there were a lot of people, there was a lot of money involved, and there was a high level of addiction. And I remember those bad old days. It was when I first moved into the city. I remember walking outside 14th Street
Mhm.
and looking down towards the west side, like on one of these Sunday mornings where you could see all the way from the east side to the west side. There was no traffic. And I
Yeah.
noticed that every single car had broken glass next to it. Like
No
all the
way.
windows had been smashed on Saturday night,
Wow.
all the way down 14th Street from the parked vehicles. And people were putting signs in their windows saying no radio because these were drug
Stealing
addicts.
what
They
they
were
can
stealing
steal.
the radios. And so people had the radios that could pop out during this time period. So I consider those kind of the bad old days crime wise. I mean, it was
And then Giuliani gets voted in. What's the cops's, what's the police's internal, I guess, or like within their bubble? What's their response to this? Is this like hell yeah, or is this like let's see what this guy can do? This guy's just another politician. We'll see what he has to say about this.
That's an
Well, what
interesting question because I don't know how many cops are going to listen to this podcast. We'll see. I mean, even if I send my friends to the website to listen to it, there's probably disagreement even among my friend group. A lot of them just praise Giuliani as being the greatest. He did support the cops, and it's very important to support the cops. You
Mhm.
need to feel like your leadership is behind you and that
Yeah.
they're not going to leave you hanging. And Giuliani did that. And once he did that and made appointments of police commissioners that also supported the cops were hungry to enforce the law and do what needed to be done to bring the crime levels down.
So they felt like
I
there was
was
already
not.
a problem. They felt like there was a problem already, and they felt like they couldn't act on it, the cops at this point?
Yeah. You had to be really, really careful because one of the things you have to be really careful about when you're a police officer is that if you're active and you're making arrests, inevitably you're going to get hit with civilian complaints. And you could be a really, calm, only use force minimally and when necessary. But if you're out there rocking and rolling and putting handcuffs on people, every week, eventually they use the civilian complaint system as a tool against those active officers. So the
Mhm.
active officers are going to rack up complaints, and then when it comes time for promotion or whatever, had you gone out there and just kept your hands in your pockets and not done anything, you're in a better position. You don't have all these complaints against you.
Wow.
So
So
that
it's
was one of the
systemized
things
to
that,
you could fail your way to the top if you wanted.
yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that situation it still exists today, but the crime is not out of control
Mhm.
today. It's just a
Yeah.
different environment now. I mean, there was a time when they had this policy of stop, question, and frisk, and you would stop people, question them if they're suspicious, you frisk them for weapons. And back in 1990, when they had 2,000 murders, a lot of people, a lot of very bad people were armed, and the stop, question, and frisk was a tool to protect the officers and to get the guns off the street. And it was highly effective. And then I remember reading maybe 2000 mid, you know what? I don't know what year. Let's say in the 2014 maybe it
Mhm.
was during De Blasio's era. They got rid of stop, question, and frisk. And I said it's going to be a disaster. I mean, in my mind, I thought it would be a disaster, but it turns out it really wasn't a disaster. They got
Yeah.
rid of stop, question, and frisk because there were abuses. There were people who were just using it to harass, and there were officers who weren't properly using it as a tool. They were just stopping and frisking until they found a weapon, and you're making enemies all along the line of the people you're stopping and you're frisking, and this is a student or this is somebody who's just coming home from work. You're making enemies of the community by doing that.
Yeah.
So when it went away, I predicted it was going to be a disaster, but it hasn't been, and crime continues to go down. So it's a very complicated formula. I mean,
Yeah.
I would not recommend broken windows now, but broken there's are you familiar with the broken windows theory?
No.
Well, broken windows was one of the things that Giuliani's team came up with. This is under Commissioner Bratton. I'm not sure who actually invented it. Bratton had some really innovative police. He, 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 he's a real interesting guy. He was a chief of LA, he was a chief in Boston. And then you have some graffiti, and you don't address those issues. People start to think like, nobody cares. This is a
Yes.
free for all. And during that time in the 1990s, there was definitely something to that. And so
Yeah.
when the graffiti went up, they'd take it down right away. And then they started arresting people for minor crimes. And I'll
I
give
was
you an
yeah.
example. I went to a warrant unit for transit police.
Mhm.
And so you start at like 4 in the morning. Actually, I think I got there around 3:30 in the morning. And you try and get people while they're asleep. That's the theory anyway. A lot of times we're banging on the door and everybody's awake and partying.
Yeah.
But you go there, and these transit warrants were for people who jumped the turnstiles and they didn't show up in court. And before we went out, they would read the rap sheet of the person we're going after. And sometimes we had one guy, he did like 20 years for homicide. And now we're going to go to his house at 4 in the morning, bang on his door and say, police. You can't say, police, we're only here for a minor summons. You can't. So we had one guy jump out of a second floor window, and man, he hit the ground, took off running, from like Spider-Man. He took off, and we had to run after him, chase him, tackle him. And then
It
he
was for
said,
a
what did I
and
do?
it's for a minor infraction?
Yeah, yeah. He's like, well, what did I do? And he knows what he did, but I mean, we said you didn't show up in court for your transit ticket when you jumped the turnstile, and he was like, oh god, oh, that's it. I'm like, so some of these people were, really career criminals, like bad people, and so I'm doing this dangerous, really dangerous work because you're banging on a door to take them in, and they don't know why you're there, and some of them
Yeah.
have done other stuff, and we don't know what they did. We're
Yeah.
just there for that. And so what would happen is when you do bring them in, sometimes the prints would come back and they would hit for warrants in other places. And this is all part of the broken windows theory, that you don't let the minor offenses slide.
Yeah.
And I think that theory, I've been reading a lot about it. I don't read that much about police, but if I see something in the New York Times or some article about, policing, and I go through it, and it, I don't think it should be discredited. Broken windows worked in that time and in that place, and it worked very well.
Mhm.
And it really helped bring down crime in New York quickly. Would
Mhm.
I do broken windows now? Probably not. There's probably some other strategy that might be as effective
Really?
or more effective. Like, I think society changes, and crime, like the crimes and the type of crimes and the people, the mentality of the people who are committing the crimes, the level of drugs. There's a lot of It's kind of a complex formula that goes into these sorts of things.
It's interesting because, first of all, it's funny that you said that you explained all that because I was literally about to ask you. I read about this theory that says that if you crack down on small crimes, then big crimes come to a stop, and I didn't know what it was called. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so happy you brought that up. It's funny because it feels to me, at least, that the type of the type of I guess the societal misfits, right? That you would describe in New York, at least in New York and California and Chicago, in a lot of these places today, maybe not Chicago as much, but it went from being kind of violent in nature, maybe this is how you're talking about society develops, to being a little bit more passive, almost like and I hate to use the word like zombies, but drugs or homelessness, or there's a lot of public, uh, using defecation and using the bathroom and like all over the place. It's just it's terrible, and but it seems to be more of a passive type of, hey, these people are kind of just here minding their own business relative to, hey, I don't know if someone's going to break into my car and steal my radio, or trying to take my money for different things. So it is interesting that you're saying that perhaps that wouldn't work as effectively as a system, but I think the general feeling in a lot of these places, and like you mentioned at the beginning, kind of really exploded after after the George Floyd death riots and phenomenon, really, I would call it, or
Yeah.
historical event,
Yeah. Yeah.
was that people were afraid to apply any kind of law and order in any kind of context. And like you said, listen, I don't know if I was living in New York how I would feel about someone coming into my a cop coming to my knock, banging at my door at 2 o'clock in the morning, being like, "There's a minor infraction you have to show up to court for." I'd be like, "Can't you like like isn't there another way to do this?" But on the other hand, status quo or the law and order in system, then people are going to just take it as more of a recommendation for society relative to,
Yeah.
hey, this is the world that we're all mutually agreeing to participate in, and these are the rules that we're going to mutually agree to play by.
Yeah. It's one of those situations. What I was trying to emphasize in my explanation was a lot of the things I read in the paper now are negative against broken windows, saying it's like it's been discredited. And it
Has it?
really hasn't been discredited. It's just
Yeah.
it's
I don't know
something
how
that
I can't imagine how that would even work. Are you telling people that,
yeah,
like,
it's something I don't think it's appropriate right now or necessary right now. But back in 1990, when we had 2,200 and I forget the exact numbers, like 2,245 or something like that, and that's a lot of homicides. And
yeah.
people were scared to go out, and they had night against violence. Like the police would form these large cordoned off
Mhm.
areas so people could walk around at night and feel safe. Otherwise, they weren't going out. At some point, then, maybe broken windows was absolutely the appropriate philosophy, and it worked. Because times changed, the crack epidemic kind of, definitely subsided. I don't even know if you can get. I'm sure you can get crack on the street now, but it wasn't like it used to be. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of
I
a
know it's now
different.
it's fentanyl. I
Yeah,
mean,
now now
now
fentanyl.
it's a
Yeah,
different
which is, oh
game.
my goodness,
Yeah,
incredibly
I
deadly
did
stuff.
an episode with a former DEA officer who has a program called I think 2 milligrams, and that's how much fentanyl it takes to completely to overdose, and basically raising awareness about. I mean,
Yeah,
and we could kind of go through this history of how the fentanyl epidemic kind of started, going all the way from painkillers and all, and overprescribed painkillers that kind of tore through the country for the last 25 years or so,
yeah.
thanks to my fellow Jewish brethren, the Sackler family,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
had a
exactly.
lot
I
to
saw
do.
that. I saw the Netflix thing on that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. The
yeah,
the Purdue Pharma, but
yeah.
it's really nice. How did you guys, what was your, for people that watch a lot of TV shows or watch movies and stuff like that, there's always this kind of tension between federal law and local law. Can you elaborate, or maybe do you have any experience in dealing with the federal police as a cop, as a local cop, or vice versa, and what that kind of that give and take and that interactions are usually like?
I'll tell you a joke. So local law enforcement, there's a raid. There's a joint task force raid on a house, and local law enforcement, they let their dogs go, and the dog goes flying into the house and chase after the suspects out the window. DEA, they show up, they have their dog, they let the dog go, goes in, sniffs out, finds narcotics. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, they let their dog go, finds all these weapons all over the house. And the FBI, they let their dog go, and he pulls out a microphone and starts holding a press conference. All right, so no, it's now I got to back it up and say nothing but respect and love for the federal agencies, and we work with them in New York. we're in all these task force intertwined. Uh, and my brother, more so than me, my brother worked on these task forces. He worked on DEA task force and some other federal task force, and they do great work. And that whole thing on Law and Order, where they're like, oh, we're taking this case, or this is our, there's like a turf battle type thing. It might occur in some jurisdictions, but in New York, we tend to work together, and there are certain federal crimes where the feds are in charge. I don't think NYPD like says, "Oh no, we're going to handle this bank robbery." You better have a good reason for it because it's an FBI case. They do all the bank robberies and interstate things. Sometimes, I guess, when a case goes interstate, it could fall under a different jurisdictions. But I thought the cooperation was quite good, and I think that some of that, as depicted on television, is a little bit overdone for dramatic purposes.
Yeah, I guess so. I suppose so. I liked your joke though. That was
Well,
that was so funny.
there's a cop from Detroit told me that
But
one.
yeah, I bet. It's so tell me about now. I want to hear a little bit about writing this book. I want to hear about the creative process. I want to hear about how you decided to make it fictional as opposed to nonfiction. And the truth is, I wouldn't even necessarily give up on that comedy type of way of telling stories or even serious stories because it's a very, very difficult balance and a very tender balance, I would say, to kind of to strike. But there have been a lot of amazing. I mean, even the TV show The Sopranos, right? Like that has some
Yeah, yeah,
genuine hysterical,
yeah,
moments
yeah.
just
It's
all
a lot
over
of
it, and
dark
you could
comedy in
do it.
there, a lot of gallows humor.
Sure.
But I wrote the book. As a
Why did
matter
you
of fact,
decide to write it?
what's that?
Why did you decide to write it?
I thought it was a unique story that because people aren't familiar with the UN missions, they're not really familiar with officers from across the entire U.S. I had, American colleagues from departments in North Carolina, Texas, California. I mean, they come from the whole country going into
Mhm.
a post-war environment in the Balkans and doing actual policing. And so it was kind of an interesting environment that a lot of people aren't aware of. A lot of people didn't
Yeah.
really know that we had these American police officers that went to East Timor, to Bosnia, to Haiti, to Kosovo, and I wanted to tell that story. And I
Mhm.
also wanted to uh, kind of tell the story about my experience, but I didn't want to do a memoir. I mean, I started something like a memoir, and I realized by chapter 3 I'm boring. So
Yeah.
I need to make it fictional. But that haunted me throughout the book was I'm writing fiction. I can make an explosion happen. I can make, all kinds of things. And then I'm thinking of writing that. I'm saying, nah. I worried about my former colleagues saying, "Come on, man, that's bullshit." You know,
Mhm.
if in this case, having to end the book, the antagonist in this was the former Kosovo Liberation Army guy. He's
Mhm.
the antagonist. He's the bad guy. But I was working with former Kosovo Liberation Army guys who were good guys in the book
Mhm.
also. So I didn't really take a firm stand pro-Serbian or pro-Albanian. This generally was like Albanians and Serbian civil war happening in a region that was predominantly Albanian, ethnic Albanian. So the book, I think there was enough funny stories in there and enough comedy, and I left a lot in. So when I finished the first draft, it was 87,000 words. Your average novel comes in at 80,000. So I knew
Okay.
some of that was going to hit the floor, but I took it to a pro, and the pro said, hey, you have your protagonist getting on the airplane halfway through the book. You can't have this. I had far too much in New York. I was trying to develop this character too much before I sent the character to Kosovo. So in the rewrites, I think almost 20,000 words ended up on the cutting room floor. A lot of that was comedy, but there was enough comedy left in it. And I'll give you an example of the comedy. This is more, I don't know if any of, see, I'm a little bit older, and so some of the writers that inspired me are from
Mhm.
the 80s and from
Okay.
the 90s. But there's a guy, Nelson DeMille. that I absolutely love. I'm a big Nelson DeMille fan. And Nelson DeMille wrote these books, the John Corey's series. And John Corey is a wisecracking New York City detective who gets on this joint terrorism task force and he chases terrorists. And he has this book, The Line, which is fantastic. And he's chasing a Libyan terrorist in the northeast of the U.S. And so I really adopted a lot of his, even his writing kind of style. John
Sure.
Corey's in first person, and then the antagonist is in third person. So John Corey's telling the story first person. The antagonist story is in third person until they meet, and then it becomes first person. A lot of the professional editors, when they saw that, they didn't like that. They're like, why isn't
Yeah.
this book in third person? Well, I'm copying Nelson DeMille. He did the John
Yeah.
Corey series, first person and third person. It switched, and eventually it ended up in first person with John Corey calling the action.
Mhm.
But that was kind of let's say my motivation to try and do something along the lines of John Corey, so that the reader really gets a sense of Kosovo and what the mission was like. And the crimes I describe in there, even I changed the names of some of the villages, but they occurred. Those crimes occurred while I was there.
Wow.
And so, but let me get back to the humor. So to give you an example of like a mildly humorous story, JB is not a wisecracking detective. He's more of a situational guy.
Mhm.
So JB's out on patrol. He pulls over a car, gets a license, registration, does the paperwork. He puts a radio on top of the roof of the car. He gives the information back to the drivers. He gets in the car and drives off. And as he's driving away, he hears on his partner's radio, "Hello." And he's like, "Man, somebody's sounds like somebody got a hold of one of our radios. Hello." And he realizes it's his radio. And this is a very big problem. If you lose your radio, this is a very, very big flag in your folder, let's say. This is something you can get in
Yeah.
big trouble for. They could make you pay for the radio. It could turn into a big problem. And then she starts talking, and she's got this heavy dis dem and does New York accent, and she sounds like Cyndi Lauper. And she
Okay.
starts saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and cops are telling her, "Get off the air." She's like, "Don't tell me to shut up. You shut up." And so the radio had 8 hours left on it. And so this woman was just putting on a show for 8 hours, even doing like she was saying, "Bad cop, no donut, bad cop, no donut." And it's funny now. Wasn't funny at the time because it happened to me.
Oh, that really did happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Wow.
no, no. But in the book, it actually damages his career severely. In real life, one of the other sectors saw the woman and heard, like he could hear her talking into the radio and see her talking. And he ran out and took the radio from her and gave it back to me. He didn't report it. He went inside, found out who signed out the
Wow.
radio, got my partner on the radio. And so it was about an hour where I had my heart in my throat. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is going to really hurt my career." And as it turned out, I got the radio back. But in the book, it really does hurt JB's career. She broadcast for 6 hours and causes a big problem for him. The other way, I'm doing the Campbell's hero's journey. So this is a standard kind of way to write a
Can you
book. You
explain what
have
that is if anyone doesn't know what that is?
Yeah, the Campbell's hero's journey is kind of the formula that Campbell was a professor who studied all great stories from around the world, going back to the ancient Greeks and looking at these stories and finding these different components, and found some things that they all share, or
Mhm.
more or less share.
Yeah.
And so you have the protagonist, and I'll use two modern day examples. These are actually movies, probably before there were books, but it's the same idea. Harry Potter, he's a boy living under the stairway. Luke Skywalker, he's a farmer out on a
Often about
field.
parents, right?
And then what happens is they're living their lives, and you have different levels of fulfillment in their lives, but an invitation to go on a journey arrives. And so in the case of Star Wars, the droids come and they want Luke Skywalker, he wants to go
Mhm.
with Obi-Wan Kenobi and find out all about this stuff. And in Harry Potter, it's a literal invitation to go to Hogwarts. And he finds out that, he's what was he, like a warlock or
Wizard,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're a
So
wizard,
and
Harry,
then
is Hagrid's line.
he goes on the journey. He decides to go on the journey, and then there's an antagonist there. There's somebody, and in this case, Voldemort is the bad guy. And in the case of Star Wars, it's
Darth Vader.
James Earl
James Earl
Jones.
Jones.
Yeah, the James Earl Jones
Darth Vader.
character,
Yeah.
who turns out to be his father. So, and then you have allies, like Harry Potter had allies helping him, and in the case of Luke Skywalker, he had allies helping him, and then he tries, but he fails, and Harry tries, but he fails, but then he girds the loins and eventually triumphs and comes back a different person, a changed
Yeah.
person. And
Yeah.
so that was the formula that I was using, which is very common. JB had to get an invitation to go to Kosovo. And what I did was I damaged his career so badly that he wanted to go to Kosovo. It was
Mhm.
an easy decision. He's like, my career in New York is totally
It's
screwed
done.
up. And the
Yeah.
other thing I did to damage JB's career was, and this is also a true story, but it didn't happen in New York. There was a body at a crime scene, and the officer was charged with guarding the crime scene. So they rope it off, and they're just waiting for the crime scene unit to show up. And while he's sitting there, the real case happened in Florida. It rained about 20 miles up, but it just, deluge in Florida like it does at 2 o'clock every day during the summer.
Yep.
The huge
That's where I live now,
deluge.
by the way.
Oh, you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And he's guarding this site, but he didn't realize that it was like next to a canal, or it was fairly dry where he was, and there was like no water there. And then the water, that when it rains in Florida, they start opening up some of these different levees. They open them to let the water drain from those lakes that they have there, and the water came rushing down and essentially washed the body away, and he didn't realize it.
Oof.
And so he lost the body at a crime scene. And the when I heard that story, I thought it was hysterical. Cops, like, if you're going to get in trouble, go big, right?
Yeah.
You lose a body at a crime scene, man. But I did that to JB also. He lost a body at a crime scene where there was, he was on a midnight shift. He's there, watching this body, but it was raining, and he didn't realize that all the water was going to pour down in this one dry area, and it gets washed into the East River. So that was the other thing I did. So it's not like ha ha, comedy. It's kind of
It's
dark,
circumstantial.
yeah, dark situational comedy. But there is, I mean, there's also the interaction because I'm Catholic, Irish Catholic, and I go to the mission, and there are 6 guys from Belfast, Northern Irish.
Sure.
Now they're known as the Northern Irish Police Service. Back then, they were the Royal Ulster Constabulary. So these guys are Protestant, not very pro-Catholic, let's say. And those are my guys that I had to work with. And I think that story also was just kind of interesting. The interaction between, the Irish Catholic guy and the Irish Protestant guys from the Royal Ulster Constabulary. And I ended up becoming to be very good friends with several of them. I can't say I stayed in touch with all of them, but there's some of them I stayed in touch with to this day. I had a blast with them, but we had some funny, interesting conversations. A little bit about Northern Ireland and the Catholics and the
Mhm.
Protestants and the conflict there. So that was another kind of interesting thing about the mission. There was just people from all over the world. We had about 60 countries there. So in my
It's
station
incredible.
house, we had I kid you not, Fiji. We had 2 officers from Fiji. We had Egypt, Jordan. We had Pakistan, India, Finland, Great Britain, Spain, and Germany, and the U.S. Probably Austria. But usually they sent everybody out, usually in pairs or threes. They never sent one person from one country. There was always a colleague. So I was there when I first got there, I think there were 3 Americans there. And then for a stretch, it was 2, but we've had up to 4. But just an interesting how well we kind of got along. I mean, it was just a very interesting time, and I really felt like I could do kind of, let's say, use the structure of Campbell's hero's journey, have a protagonist go on this journey, and have these kind of interesting things. It did become more of a suspense type book. It's based on a true story, though. The crimes in there are all pretty accurate. And there was another influenced me a lot. This is also from the 80s and the 90s, Lawrence Sanders. And he wrote these Palm Beach detective books. And if you're down there, and I don't know if you're near Palm Beach, this was Bill Clinton's favorite author.
Yeah,
Really
45
just,
minutes.
hi? What's that?
I said 45 minutes from Palm Beach.
Okay. So this is a Palm Beach
45
show.
minutes from Palm Beach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got you. This author, he's got Palm Beach down. Really fantastic stories, but he describes food, and it's one of the things he does in his book, is all his books actually. He gives these really elaborate descriptions of food, and sometimes he's only talking about a bar hamburger and french fries, but he talks, very
Mhm.
eloquently about matching beer with it, matching wine with it. And it was funny. I mean, like, it was, but really well done. And I tried to do that with the food in Yugoslavia. Or former Yugoslavia. There was a lot of interesting foods that I had never tried before. And I try and, describe those foods. I try to keep it light, kind of like Lawrence Sanders did. Some of that hit the cutting room floor, but some of it made it. So I have a little bit of a travel log, in addition to having the Hero's Journey, that gets a little travel logish when I'm in Kosovo, describing all the sights and the smells and the food and the music and things like that. So I do touch on that a little bit. Give people kind of a feel for Kosovo back in 2001.
It's really cool. That's really awesome, especially because I think my experience and my experience from all my buddies is that most Americans just think that most of the world, like 90% of the world, is like America, and then like maybe wherever their family's from, and like maybe a little bit of China and Russia, and like that's it, you know. And so like
Yeah,
I think it's really valuable to kind of provide that. I had the professor that got me into writing is an Irish teacher from Jersey named Joe Weil, and one thing that he did the first day of class to make me realize that, that writing and poetry and being expressive is a skill is he just described eating a hamburger. And the way that he described it
yeah,
was
yeah,
so incredible. You take a bite and like the juice drips to the back of your fingers and runs down your hand, and you know that you have a little bit in your mustache, but you don't even care at that moment because like and like all this awesome stuff. And I'm like, this guy has like such a zeal, such a passion for life that like, and like it's funny because I immediately understood what he was talking about and I was brought there with him, but I never would have thought to put those words to it until he said that. And that's when I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
there's something to this writing. Do you feel like you got the your writing itch scratched, or do you think you're going to do some more writing?
I did a lot of work. I read a lot of books on how to write novels,
Oh yeah. Did
and
you find them helpful?
I found, yeah, I did. Not all
Yeah.
of them. One of the things I struggled with the most was show don't tell. Oh my goodness. When the experts went over it, you need to show this, not tell this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just say it
Mm-hmm.
was hot out. Say that gum was melting on the sidewalk, or give some description so that you show them what it is. And I struggled mightily with that. Campbell's Hero's Journey, I thoroughly enjoyed reading. I'll give you one recommendation, probably the best out of all the books that I read on how to write. There's a book called Take Off Your Pants. It's not a sexy book.
Oh man.
Essentially, this woman, she's describing, if you're writing a book by the seat of your pants, or are you structuring it? Are you, having your identifying who your protagonist is, who their
Yeah.
allies are, who the
That's what I
antagonist
struggle
is.
with.
I mean, there's also the snowflake method, too complicated for me. I think I'm a little bit ADD. So even actually my protagonist is ADD, because he loses the radio and he loses the body at the crime scene. I attribute it to ADD, and that's him saying, I'm never going to be a detective. I'm ADD.
Mm-hmm.
He eventually goes to Kosovo and proves that to be completely wrong. He's very very smart and very insightful when it came to the investigation. So that's part of the the character arc is that hey, he's not some ADD clown. He's pretty smart guy, knows who makes some very interesting suggestions to how to catch the antagonist. So the short answer is, if I go to Ukraine, there might be a land of broken toys, Ukraine, but right now I only have the land of broken toys, Kosovo.
Right.
So if your listeners would like to read an interesting book that's grounded in fact,
I'd
it's
love to check it
fiction,
out.
but
I don't
it's
know anything about Kosovo. I've never even
well,
heard of it until you brought it up.
tell you the truth, the people I know who have read it, the guys seem to like it a lot more than the women. I'm
Yeah.
about 50-50 with the women. It's a little bit of a dude book. But you know, Nelson DeMille was also kind of he had a large young man's audience. And there was a recent article in the New York Times about how fiction, like men are just not reading fiction at all. I mean, men read biographies,
Yeah.
true crime. They're reading all these categories. Fiction is not something they're really into.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping that maybe this book could find a niche of people who find this sort of thing, like policing and some murders and little gallows humor, that they find something like that interesting. I'm not discouraging women from reading it. I had a couple women that really surprised me, like a woman that I know who's kind of anti-cop, and she's a friend. She read it, she loved it. I was like,
Oh,
whoa. So when you write, you're supposed to know your audience, and quite frankly, now I'm like confused. I don't even know who my audience is.
I
I
think
have
that's good. I don't know. I don't subscribe to the idea of having to know your audience. I think that you have to follow your intuition because if you're working too hard to appeal to an audience, I think that that could it doesn't pass the smell test for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I think that that's how shelves get filled up with kind of empty books because everyone's trying to appeal, write the same thing the same way, appealing to the same people. But if you're just trying to tell yours, then there and it's authentically your story and like the way you're describing, so many of these cases are based on real life, and so much is based on your real experience. I think that people that are searching for authentic will like that. That's something that
Yeah.
that you don't Steve Jobs used to say, he used to hate getting these audience tests. He's like, we tell the audience what they want. You tell the customer what they're
Uh,
looking for. They don't even know what they want until we give it to them. So, there's two mentalities. And actually, I was going to ask you, I want to go on to the next section, but before I do, what was it like working with a publisher, and what was the experience getting a publisher, and what was that process like?
I self-published. I had
You
to.
self-published.
Oh my
Brilliant.
God.
Excellent.
I tried to put out a comedic police novel like a week after George Floyd's murder. That wasn't going to happen. Yeah, I know. It's like,
You could have gone to
you know
Ben
what?
Shapiro and the Daily Wire. They would do it.
Because I hired an executive. I paid a lot of money to an executive editor that's been published like 20 times. I said, I want this book, to be commercially published. And he said, here's what we got to do. And he did a great job. I mean, the book reads so much better than my original 87,000 word
Yeah.
manuscript. He did a great job of editing it. And yeah, the George Floyd murder happened, and then I actually went back in. I took some of the stuff from the cutting room floor. I think he cut it down to like 67,000 words, which was.
Whoa.
But then when I kind of realized nobody's going
Your
to
book's
publish this.
unrecognizable after that.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. It was definitely needed some cutting down, but yeah, he really cut it down a lot. So I said I'm going to self-publish. I looked at the stuff on the cutting room floor and I put some of it back in. I put some of the things that that were kind of personal to me that I thought should have been in there because there was no chance this was getting commercially published. That wasn't going to happen. So
Right. Right.
we'll
Okay.
see. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
We'll
know
see. Here's
I don't
praying.
know if I'm going to do another one unless I go do another mission. And it wouldn't be a UN mission. I'd probably be wearing a suit somewhere in the Capitol. Like this, I was in uniform out there going to jobs, so
So
I
tell
could
me.
make
So
for a better
yeah, I
book.
want I want to go into that. I want to go. So how'd you get this opportunity to do it? What was it like picking up and going to another country? What was it like dealing with the people there? What is there a language barrier? Are people there like confused what you're doing? Like, how does this work? Because again, so few people are really aware of this. I know that there's this notion of like rebuilding, you know, after people go to after countries go to war. I know that there's a lot of immigration that happens post-war. A lot of times, you know, I mean, you can directly trace these huge influxes of communities, often, especially particularly to America, but throughout Europe and throughout the rest of the world, based on where their world, like where the previous war was, or where you know where the presence of a certain establishment is. So, what? How'd you end up there, and where else did you go? And tell me a little bit about that.
Well, after I retired from the NYPD, I had my connections from Kosovo, and I started off in North Macedonia on a mission. And they had kind of a spillover war, but this was more of a training mission where I was teaching in the academy. And it was such a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed that mission a lot, but it got cut short for me. The when you're working as a contractor, sometimes the money runs out or another
Mhm.
organization took over. In this case, another organization took over the training. And then I ended up working as a contractor for Department of Justice, and I went to Albania, which
Wait, so I'm
wasn't
sorry,
a
real quick, but in between all this, right? You're
yeah.
working, you retire from the NYPD. How long are you sitting at home? You don't know what to do with yourself. You're bored. What how
No,
does
no, I
what?
went right back into it.
Okay, and then you said,
Yeah,
but I'm not going to do this for the NYPD anymore. I want to be I'm going to do this for an independent company or you know contractor
yeah,
company or whatever.
yeah.
Okay,
I
and then
worked as a
do you get
contractor
a
for this.
selection of places
What?
to go?
Yeah, you have to apply to different positions around the world. So I worked in Albania. I stayed in the Balkans a long time. So I was
Mhm.
in Macedonia, which is now North Macedonia, Albania. I was in Belgrade, Serbia for a year,
Wow,
and then I did a security gig in Saudi Arabia.
wow,
And
really?
then I was in Mexico. So out of all of them, the only place I spoke the language was Mexico. My Spanish is like highly conversational, so
Nice.
I sometimes need a little help during the professional discussions, but I can go there and rent a car and order food, and I can speak. I'm highly conversational in Spanish.
Awesome.
I don't like calling myself fluent because I did struggle when we
Yeah.
sat down with native speakers. I was
I
like
feel the way
the
about Hebrew, by the way. I've been speaking Hebrew since I was a kid, but
oh okay
I learned it from my grandfather, and so I'm walking into modern day. I'm walking into 2026 speaking 19, you know, 60s Hebrew, and everyone is like, "Dude, why are you talking like my grandfather?" I'm like, "Okay, I give up on this. I'm not fluent. I'm socially conversational, is what I call myself.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean,
same
I was
thing."
that way. There's one region of Mexico. Now I keep referring to cartoons. I don't want to sound like a moron here because I'm referring to cartoons. But from my childhood, there was a cartoon, Speedy Gonzales. Did you ever hear this one?
Sure, sure, sure.
But it was completely racist cartoon. They're like, "Oh, Senor Speedy, we're too lazy to go get the cheese," or they're always saying something racist, and they're drinking tequila. These two mice, but
Yeah,
their Mexican accent was this really slow no, tintatán, and those guys I could understand. They're like, "Hola, ¿qué tal?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
My I like they had a despacio suave. I could understand them, but in Mexico City, wow, it sounded like a machine gun to me. It's like,
Yeah, I know the
I,
Dominicans speak very quickly too, right?
what's that?
The Dominicans apparently speak very quickly too.
What the problem? This is like a personal issue because when I was in a language immersion course in Costa Rica, and the head of the program pulled me to the side and asked me about my hearing, and I said, "Oh, my hearing's okay." She said, this is a very rare thing, but it does happen where someone speaks Spanish a lot better than they understand it, and that was my case. I can speak Spanish like a lot better than I understand it. So my shortcoming when I'm working in a Spanish country, I can say pretty much anything. I can
Mhm.
express any type of thought. But man, when they answer me, I'm struggling,
That's
particularly
interesting.
native
That's
speakers.
fascinating.
Yeah, I maybe I got dropped when I was a kid or something. I don't know, but I definitely need to watch a lot more TV, the telenovelas, and get my ear at least get it even with my speaking level because there is
Yeah.
a kind of a discrepancy
How much
between
does that
how well
help?
I speak. What's that?
How much does that help watching, let's say, local TV or movies in a different language or whatever? Does it help or
I,
not
I
really?
I think it helps. Yeah, because I'm trying to learn Macedonian now, and it's really tough. Part of the problem is the the Cyrillic alphabet I find difficult. It gets harder when you're older. That's the whole thing.
Ah, well, that's for sure. Yeah, you got to take
When
some
you're
psychedelics
young,
and open
your
your brain
brain
up.
is like a sponge, you know? And then when you got like my daughter, she was a baby. She was like 3 years old. When I was in Serbia, she was 3 years old. And in Serbia, my wife's from the region. She's from North Macedonia. She's like, yeah, we'll send her to kindergarten. So you send the kid out to kindergarten at like three
Oh
years
yeah.
old. And she was coming back speaking fluent Serbian. As a little girl, she's there during the daytime singing Serbian songs, and she understood Serbian just from being in that environment. And I could listen to Serbian 24 hours a day for months and wouldn't understand anything, you know. So it's interesting how when you're
Wow.
young, you're like a sponge for languages, and then later on you lose it. It just becomes hard work. If you're determined, I was pretty determined to speak Spanish. For the amount of money
Hmm.
I spent and the amount of courses I attended, I should really be fluent, but you can only go as far as your brain's going to allow you to take you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I always wanted to learn Spanish, and I can't get my. And you know, it's funny because I work with my dad. It's a small company. My dad grew up in Miami Beach. He speaks perfect Spanish. He worked in a pizza shop growing up, right?
Oh wow.
You know, he
Yeah,
speaks
yeah,
perfect Spanish. All my coworkers are Dominican. They all speak Spanish. I'm the only one that
yeah,
knows
yeah.
like 6 words, and now I live in South Florida, and I'm like, this is absolutely bonkers that I don't speak this language,
My
but
my Spanish
it's really
improved a
hard.
lot from hanging around people that don't speak English. The problem I had in Miami when I was speaking Spanish is they would change on me. They would hear me and they'd be like, "Well, we don't need to speak Spanish with this
Right.
guy. We'll speak English." I was in a store and they're all speaking Spanish, and I come in and I said, I don't know, estoy buscando para, they're like, what do you want? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I wanted to practice my Spanish is what I is what I wanted to do. But yeah, when I was in, it was interesting for me. I was in Tijuana, and I was working at a police academy in Tijuana, and I was shocked at how little people outside of the hotel was speaking Spanish. I'm looking at the wall. I'm in Mexico looking at the wall. San Diego is like a 30-minute drive. So I'm looking at
Mhm.
America from the Mexico side, and I'm speaking English in the hotel. But as soon as I go outside, they're not speaking English. And that's where like this is going to get done in Spanish or it's not going to get done. And that I found that
Yeah.
very helpful. I spent 2 weeks there, and when I got on the plane and flew back to Mexico City, my Spanish was vastly improved from 2 weeks of just having to get it done in Spanish. So if you get an opportunity to do immersion and go someplace
Immerse
where
yourself. Yeah.
yeah you immerse yourself in it, but you need a good base. Like I don't think immersion helps if you're just like hola, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
mi nombre
Yeah.
is, if you're at that stage, you probably should get to like let's say if you're at lower intermediate level, I would recommend going into immersion in some place where then you need to speak Spanish and it'll force
Yeah.
you to improve.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Definitely. So you went to Kosovo. So you went to Kosovo. You're part of this UN task force of rebuilding nations. What what takes adjusting? Well, you're in a war torn, ripped apart country, I imagine, right? And I mean, in
Yeah,
either way, it's as far from Oyster Bay, Long Island, as you can get. I imagine it
yeah,
certainly
yeah,
feels that way. So
yeah.
what's going through your mind? What's this like?
Yeah, it took a lot of adjustment. I mean, the shelves were kind of empty and we didn't have power. That was the other thing. And you really kind of
Whoa,
take power and water also. We didn't have running water. We didn't have power. Did a lot by candlelight. So it made you kind of bonded with your colleagues. We drank quite a bit. There's nothing really to do
yeah,
if you're off duty. But they burn a lot of back then. They were burning a lot of garbage. They were burning a lot of I don't know. There was always this smell of there was a power plant a few towns over from where I was located, and that put constant soot in the air. But I think the fields went fallow when the bombing occurred. Maybe they didn't plant crops, but it was just this kind of brown dust powder that was just swirling around, and your car was just always filthy. Like we would wash the cars every 2 days, and they always had this caked on dust, and there
Mhm.
was always this smell of burning garbage and cow poop. It had very distinct smells from Kosovo, and
Doesn't sound pleasant.
no, no, it wasn't. But we had a good time. You know, we had good camaraderie. We had a few laughs, and the work was interesting. And I really felt like we were helping people. I think we were trying to help
Do the
people.
locals appreciate you guys? They appreciated you
Yeah.
guys were
Oh
there?
yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, the Albanians really love, particularly Americans. They love the Americans, and the Serbians had been through a lot. I mean, the Serbians that had gotten involved with the paramilitaries and did the war crimes and things like that. They left. They weren't there. The Serbians that were there while I was there, they were just farmers. They weren't like former Yugoslav paramilitary unit members. They were smart enough to get out of there. So they were kind of in a tough spot because the Albanians
Mhm.
they were refugees, a lot of them, and they were coming back. And that's where a lot of the
Right.
crimes occurred. They were payback essentially. So the vast majority of the crimes in
Wow.
Kosovo were committed by the paramilitaries during the war. But Yugoslav army also didn't have a very good record, and that's why the police were working with them. So that's why the police left, because they were kind of working with the military and the paramilitaries. And then when they came back, that's when the payback started. So I was there for the payback, and someone could take the wrong lesson from the book, thinking like, oh yeah, this guy's just showing the Serbians as victims and the Albanians as the terrorists and things like that. And that's not the case. If you're keeping a scorecard, the Serbians did a lot more before the bombing. They did a lot more
Mhm.
awful things. But then
Yeah.
at some point it's like I even do use the term scorecard. Like the antagonist in the book, he's keeping a scorecard, and he's like, they did this, they did this, they did this, and now we're going to do this. We're going to pay it back. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that I was trying to relate in the book was that tribalism is, and you
Mhm.
could even say nationalism, tribalism and nationalism, they're kind of like salt. A little pinch of salt is fantastic. It can help make food great. You put a lot of salt on, it's not good at all. And if you put a ton of
Yeah.
salt on, you can kill somebody. It's
Yeah.
deadly. And that's
Yeah.
the way, like it's fine to have a little tribalism, maybe a little ethnic pride, a little nationalism, but man, you don't want to have too much of it. It can lead to these man, these this is like 500 years of, conflict essentially,
Yeah.
that they talk in this region. They talk about things that happen anywhere from World War I, but they can go back even
Mhm.
further to
Yeah.
the Battle of Kosovo, which is like, I think it was like in the late 1400s, early 1500s. But the Kosovo Polje, the field of Kosovo, oddly enough, I think the Albanians and the Serbians fought together against the Turks. And like
Sure.
that one should be a good example because you guys got together and fought against the Turks. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, at
yeah,
one point, Iran and Israel and America were all pretty good allies, not too long
yeah, yeah.
ago. So,
But
you're
things
not it's not
things can
yeah,
change
things
around the corner.
change.
But yeah,
Things
it was.
change.
I don't know that I accomplished that. I tried to make this book a cautionary tale against tribalism. As a matter of fact, the city I was in was Lipion, but in the book, I changed the name of the city to Fizpleme. It's Fispleme. Fiz in Albanian is tribe, and Pleme in Serbian is tribe. So
Oh,
I just put
nice.
Fizpleme. This is like a tribal thing, and I was gonna like drop some like really heavy messages, but like real discreet. Only certain people would be able to see where I'm coming from, and
Mhm.
I struggled. Essentially, I think you can look at the protagonist and the antagonist at the end of the book. They're talking to each other, and just say, this whole thing with all of the breakup of Yugoslavia was really quite tragic. It was a not that I'm an advocate for Yugoslavia staying as one, but the way that they broke up, the way that people who were neighbors, people were living next to people, setting their house on fire. Between Bosnia,
Oh my
with the
god, I know.
Croatians, with the I think the Slovenians kind of stayed out of it. They had like a little border war with the Serbs, and they stayed out of it. And Macedonia, they largely stayed out of it, but then they had Albanian. uprising after the war, and yeah, it's just a place that has all these kind of long-standing ethnic tensions, and I don't know that I have a came up with a message to alleviate this. All I know is that the people here, they did live side by side for a long time. You know, then they've had
Mhm.
periods of long periods when they lived side by side.
Mhm.
You know, you almost have to give credit to Tito because I know he just killed people, you know, in the beginning. He killed people who jumped up, you know. He just beat them down. And then he didn't have to, but during the Yugoslav time there wasn't he kept a lid on that stuff is what I without getting into all of the different ethnicities and how they controlled them. I would say Tito, if he accomplished anything, he kept a lid on the ethnic tension. And once he was gone, once communism, or I should say their version of socialism, once that was gone, uh, I don't know, people maybe they should have had a broken windows theory on ethnic
Yeah.
tribalism, but they didn't, man. And so and that's like something I didn't mention in the book, but sometimes when I get interviewed, I went over and I came back with a like a profound respect for Martin Luther King. You know, I was a
I'm doing
kid
an
when
episode on him very shortly, by the way.
is what?
I'm doing a full episode with the historian on him very
Oh,
shortly, by the
cool.
way,
Yeah,
because I don't
yeah.
know
I
anything about him. So, yeah.
No, I mean the guy. It's amazing that he was able to what he was able to accomplish peacefully. It's just incredible. I was somebody, yeah, I'm a white kid from Long Island. I'm not going to be like a big Martin Luther King guy. I mean, I think every American is moved by the "I Have a Dream" speech, right? You know, I mean, it's just an incredible speech. So, you know, if you're not moved by that, then probably there's something wrong with you. But I, not really much more than that, you know. And then when I came to Yugoslavia, I was like, wow, you know, Martin Luther King, good for him. Good for him that he was able to manage the civil rights movement peacefully. Because man, over here
Yeah.
and some other areas of the world, it doesn't go like that. It goes, you know, with violence.
It's so funny that you say that because, I mean, we and how we all perceive things because, I grew up in my life growing up for the most part, right? There's basically two types of conflicts. There's the Holocaust, and then there was the Arab-Israeli conflict, essentially. That's the only
Yeah,
thing that I thought of. And then all of a sudden, I have a good friend that's from Mumbai, and I find out about India, Pakistan, and then I find out about,
yeah,
and then I have an Irish buddy that is from, his family's from, I think, the South, but then he has a bunch of family in Galway. And I find out about the Northern Ireland conflict. And I'm like, oh
oh yeah,
shit, look at this. And then you're telling me this. And I'm like, what is going on over here? And so it's,
yeah,
and the thing that seems to run through everything is that it seems to be a human issue. This isn't a type of people or where you are in the world or this race or that race or that race or that or anything or this location or that location. I think it's tribalism. I think I think you hit the nail on the
yeah,
head. I think that it's really just it's when you put human beings in a us versus them category, then the second that someone turns into a them or a they, then you give yourself permission to
yeah,
do what you gotta do to protect us. And one of the biggest things holding us back is the fact that we don't look at humanity like in us. We don't look at people, like, and I would like to, and I would try to, and there a lot of times it takes a little bit more digging than just the surface, right? It takes a little bit more digging than just what you see the first time. I talked about this with I was talking to a professor of neurology about music. And one thing they were talking about was how when you listen to music, I'm sure you've experienced this, that there's plenty of songs you listen to for the first time or artists you listen to. You're like, it's not my thing, and then you're kind of exposed to it and oh, maybe, that's not too bad. And I like that riff. And all of a sudden that message that they're saying kind of comes across to me. That becomes
sure,
acceptable.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty cool. And I think that, we're so quick to write people off instead of look for what we have in common that it's just an enormous problem. That's the reason I started this podcast was because of that. When Trump got shot outside of Butler, and I went online and, it's funny because I've kind of flip-flopped politically. I've gone back and forth a bunch since I started following politics around 15 or 16 when I was in college. And, I tend to have more conservative values, but really like the idea of, like, kinda just letting people do their thing, and I'm not a fan of the any neo type of thing, like, coming to and, like, trying to force your perception on other people. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that there's enough in common within the value structures of most societies that we could almost always find stuff in common, you know?
Yeah.
And so I go to so Trump gets shot, and I listen to a right-wing podcast, and they're like, "This is civil war, this is what happens when you call someone a Nazi for 10 years," and then I listen to the left-wing podcast and just as vehement, and, it's and I'm like, the guy that was president of the United States, that is running currently for president, got shot in the head,
Yeah.
and no one's thinking to tone it down. Everyone's looking at this as an opportunity to just keep on on stoking the flames even more. I'm like, this is out of control, and I think that there's a very clear line where you can say, hey, maybe don't shoot someone that
Yeah,
doesn't have
shooting
the same
someone in the
opinion
head
as
is
you,
bad. That
you know, like, but
should
over
be
an
apparent.
opinion.
You know, even Charlie Kirk. I didn't really know who Charlie Kirk was. I mean, let's say I'm
Yeah.
a small C conservative, but small C. My family, they were kind of like blue dog Democrats. So I'm
Hmm.
let's say if
Sure.
I were running for office, I'd be like a Maine Republican or something. I'm pretty middle of the road. But then the Charlie
Yeah.
Kirk thing, it's like I heard of this Turning Point USA, but after the murder, I just was blown away by what people were saying. It's like the guy was going on campus and talking to people. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
expressing right-wing conservative values. Maybe I wouldn't rock with all of that, but man, come on, man, they shot him in. He
Yeah.
was shot in the neck. And people,
In front of
it's pretty
everyone.
sick, man.
Yeah,
That
in
people
front
would
of
celebrate
everyone.
that.
You're getting this, and what's fast and I was listening to a podcast about this. Everyone is flooded with this kind of visuals, and I'm sure you could speak about this as a cop more there, and from your career. Like, you're not seeing the light leave someone's eyes. You're not smelling the blood on the scene. You're not experiencing the
Yeah,
panic. You're just watching. It's like, "Oh, good, that guy I didn't like, he's dead." Like almost like when you watch, like, a
yeah.
movie.
Let me go
You watch
online
an
and
Avengers
celebrate.
movie, and
I
okay,
know. I know. Well, the online world. Thankfully, I missed most of it. I was one of the last guys to get a smartphone. I had a clamshell phone up until about, well, maybe now it's 7 years, but I was going around with a clamshell phone when everybody else
good for
was
you.
typing
Good
away.
for you.
And yeah, now I feel, great that I didn't immerse myself. I didn't get a Facebook account. I do have a website. It's jbbyrne.com. And
I'm gonna put in the show link
oh,
for
okay, good.
for
Yeah,
people to
because
look up.
that's
I'll put all the
that's
links that you want.
there's a picture of me doing a car stop in Kosovo, but it's me promoting the book. But generally speaking, I didn't let the internet warp me. Thankfully, I have other
Yeah.
issues,
Yeah, we
definitely.
all
But
do, right?
the staring at the phone, for and scrolling and just having a, I see it with my kids, when my daughter's like, "Daddy, can you get the waiter, to bring me a Coke?" And at the time, she's like 13 years old. I'm like, "You're 13. Put your hand up, wave them over, and ask for a Coke." And I said, "That's from the phone. You're staring at the phone
That
so much.
is.
Yeah, they lack interpersonal skills."
That is.
Right then and there, I'm
I
like,
talk
"We got
about
to
it all
start
the time.
limiting."
I'm 30. I'm 30. I got my first phone when I was in 8th grade, and it was the best and worst thing for my ability to talk to girls. I was terrified of girls,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden I could text a girl without having to worry about getting rejected or sounding dumb or getting, or stuttering or getting anxious or anything like that. I could just text a girl and not worry about it. And then I realized about a year or two later, I'm like, I might be texting these people, and when I see them, I just panic, and I'm like, "This is nuts. I can't keep doing this." So I had to self-correct. I was fortunate enough to self-correct, but I think a lot of people don't have that. It's a shame, and think about, and I was already 12 or 13. Imagine getting a phone when you're 5. Imagine getting a phone when you're
yeah,
6.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. But, yeah, Mike, man, this is such a fun conversation. I really, really enjoyed having you on. I'm gonna post all those links. Tell people where they could find your work and maybe anything that you have. And then I'll post the links on the again on the webs on the show note
Yeah, right
caption.
now it's just the Land of Broken Toys, Kosovo. It's available on Amazon.
Hmm.
And I do have the website, JB Byrne, NYPD. JB Byrne is a protagonist. So JB Byrne, NYPD at gmail.com. I'm sorry.
You live a really cool life,
That's
man.
actually the address. So it's just jbburnnypd.com is the website, and
Cool.
hopefully, there's some reviews of the book on there, and if somebody's interested, please buy the book. Hope you enjoy it. I'm more than happy to answer questions about it. Someone reads it and says, "Hey, is this BS or is this really happened?"
Yeah.
Shoot me an email. I'll tell you. I was there. So
Awesome. Okay, you live a really cool life, man, and I'm a big fan. I'm
yeah,
a big
thank you.
admirer, and thank you for everything that you've done, man.
Thank you for
Because
having me on.
again, I don't know that I would do a, a fraction of any of this stuff, particularly moving, around like this. All these UN missions really sound incredible. But I'm a big admirer, and I really appreciate what you're doing and what you've done.
Yeah, when I reflect back on it, I sometimes think of that song. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I'm somebody. I like to move it, move it. I'm getting old now, so
If you
I,
if you end
I
up in Ukraine, let me know. I'd love to hear about
yeah.
that. Okay,
If I do go, yeah, I'll probably start another book, and maybe I'll do some promotion while I'm creating the book. But
definitely,
yeah, we'll see. I mean, the
definitely.
war has to end there. That's the problem. I mean, I don't see any end in sight. So,
Yeah, well, that's another hour and a half conversation.
and
Mike,
yeah, we'll
thanks
see,
so
and we'll
much.
see if America sends people to that one. I'm just assuming that we would be involved in peacekeeping operations, but you never know. I don't think Russia wants any Americans there. So,
No,
we'll
no,
see.
no, no.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll see.
see. Mike, thank you so much. Have a great day, man.
Thank
It's a
you.
real pleasure. Bye bye.
Bye.